All right. So, AJ, we got our applause, so we can just go.
Yeah, we can go.
So, thank you for pronouncing it okay. It's OGs, not Ox, or something like that. So, yeah, welcome to our session. I'm Waldo. This is my co-pilot. Yeah, you see what I did there, right?
So that means anything I say can be wrong.
Yeah, you are allowed to be wrong.
Thank you so
Now,
much.
I mean,
I'm good at
where
it.
are we heading at? We are heading to software that's helping us to be okay to be wrong, right? That is what I see that Copilot is all about. But in any case, we are going to talk about some AL development changes for OGs. OGs being original gangsters. Originally, this session was called for dinosaurs. I can tell you, Luc does not like to be called a dinosaur, and I get it. A dinosaur is extinct. We are not extinct, okay? We still matter, so we are still some gangsters. I like this
I
title.
was almost extinct.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what happened? We have been doing these sessions a few times, and in Bangkok, we had the stage this high, and AJ, he decided to fall off of the stage.
Well, I think he pushed me off, so fourth row, if he makes a move, please engage.
Yeah, I will try to be as far as you can. I mean, okay. So, one request. If I ask a question, I only see like 10% of the people. If I ask a question, instead of hands or whatever, clap once for yes. Don't do anything, because clapping for no would be weird. Okay? Okay. Okay. Okay? Okay, so how many OGs do we have here? How many people, let's say, have 5 years of experience? 10 years? Oh, 15 years? You see, I'm still clapping my hands. 20 years? Wow. 23 years? 24? What? Okay, there are. You seem to be in the right session. So I think we can all agree that things have changed, and we need to prepare for that future, right? So yeah, source code, the language, development environments, DevOps, file, whatnot. Things have changed. Even BC behavior has changed, and for some, that's a little bit difficult to grasp sometimes. So I have a few more questions. First of all, who of you, back in the days, when, let's say, Seaside, CAL, there are enough people here that worked with CAL, who upgraded each customer every single month? Wow, no. No way. I don't believe that. Maybe, yeah, maybe. But, I mean, only a few, only one. Or two. Do you now know what waves stand for? It's only just a few. You mean, I mean these release wave 1, release wave 2, 2024, release wave 2 that we are heading at. Are we heading at that? Yes, we are heading at that. I mean, that's just a Microsoft way to say every single month we have a big release. We announce it only twice a year, we call it a release wave, and then we just ship the first version, like 10%, second version, 10%, third version, 30%. And I don't know if you noticed, but about every single month, we could have breaking changes. Breaking changes. Also something that we need to get used to, a new thing.
Well, waves break on the beach, so.
So, who of
I'm
you?
a co-pilot, I'm allowed to say stupid things.
Yeah, and you fulfill that need. So, who of you, back in the days, CAL development, who of you did custom development? Everyone, obviously. This was what made CAL strong and powerful. We called it simplicity. I think we all now see it as stupidity. Who of you did, back in the days, CAL code reviews? Oh, come on, to be honest. Who of you did code reviews? Okay, that's as much. I heard that. Okay, that's good. But not all of us. I didn't. And also code reviews. I mean, how do you do that? If you don't have source control, decent source control, how do you do code reviews? You just go into a text file after exporting it from the object design and then, I mean, search like gazillion lines of code, right? It was difficult to do. Who of you did automated testing back in the days? Who of you is doing it now? Okay, much more. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I really think we need that. We need to live in this new world. We need to do something like this. Every single month, we are being upgraded. Every single month, it could potentially be a breaking change by Microsoft. And I mean, what is a breaking change anyway? If Microsoft breaks my test, all of a sudden that's not a breaking change because it's my test. But in a way, it's a breaking change. It's a breaking in behavior. If Microsoft breaks tests like their test, or in the test framework, it's not a breaking change because it's a test framework and they are allowed to break test framework. But that's a breaking change. So what is the breaking change anyway? So we need to prepare. And you can already guess, yeah, this is what that session is all about. So things have changed. And we are going to, I have a co-pilot. So if the things that are less important, I will ask my co-pilot. No, that's not true, sorry. But I'm going to go over some points. First point is how to look into source code. It was easy back in the days. In CIL, we just open Object Designer, we go in the object, we can change whatever we like. We can even do that in live environment. Do we miss that? Oh, come on, no, we don't miss that. That's the stupidity part of what we were able to do. But obviously now we don't have that database anymore. We don't have that easy access to the source, to Microsoft source anymore. And there's so much source. Every single month there's a new update. There are like 150 apps from Microsoft. How do we do that? So, is anyone familiar with this? Okay. That's not enough. So this is already a good point. Is of you that's familiar with this repository, are you familiar with this one? Well, less. And this is actually what you really need to look into. This is actually a new repository. I think it exists for Copilot. 2 months, 3 months,
2
4
or 3
months?
months, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
I like it if he's going to give the answers to the co-pilot.
Stefan Maron, also present here, he has a session also, I think, about validate statement. He created actually a repository where he exports all source code from Microsoft pretty much every single day. Because every single day we get a new version of code. I don't know if you know, but on BC SaaS, every single day, updates are being pushed. Yeah? So you have like a new base app every single day, multiple times a day even. Yeah? We get that all in this repository. You see it here, I have a GitHub repository, so basically just this link. You can simply clone that and use that. I did that. And I must say, I talked to, sorry, I opened this one. I talked to Stefan yesterday because I just cloned it, and it didn't really work anymore as before. Like there is a lot of branches. Every single version / localization is a branch, meaning you can really go into the code, the exact code that your customer or you are working with. And he pointed me to a description online. If you would clone this repository, there is a README to do partial clones as well. So he actually described on how you can decently use this. I did that since yesterday, and now finally I can go into source code and do something like a compare between what you see here, between like version 24 and vNext and version 24. Yes, indeed. vNext, we can look into what's upcoming. We can look at next minor. We can look at next major. V25 is already in this repository. Yeah, unbelievably interesting. So what I did is in GitLens, a simple compare. Let me zoom in a little bit because the screen is a little bit small. And you can look into whatever is coming. Obviously, app.json is being updated from 24 to 24.3 in this case. That's next minor. But you can look into code. I'm not going to go too far, but you can really see what's upcoming. If you requested an event, you can check if it's upcoming, which release it's upcoming. Maybe next minor, maybe next major, and all that. Definitely something you can look into. Copilot.
Yeah, let's switch. So, as you can imagine, we just, not randomly, but we picked a number of topics. So we're going from left to right. Access modifiers. How many of you do know what I mean with access modifiers? There's only a few in the same place. That's a good place. That's good. So access modifiers, we actually had that in CAL already for a long time. We know that a function, when that is not marked with anything, it is public. And when it is marked as local, it's only local to the object. That is an access modifier. We change the access to that function with the word local. Okay, I would have liked the term private. I would like the term public for the functions that are public. But okay, that is historically, and that is probably never going to change. But there is more around access modifiers that we can do today. They can be defined at different levels. We can define them at object level, field level, and method level. We can mark it as internal, which means only the app itself can access it and no other apps. Which means if we mark our stuff as internal, app source will not consider it a breaking change if you remove it. Not talking about fields here, because fields are still, when you remove them, still need to be there as obsoleted because that is removing data. But removing functions from code units are, when they're marked as internal, are not considered to be a breaking change, which makes it easier. You don't have to obsolete them first. So this function here is only accessible from inside the my own app and not from the outside. And we can do that on object level as well. Now, the whole code unit is not accessible from the outside, only from inside my app, which means that that internal procedure you see here is kind of duplicate. The first do something is actually also internal. So when we mark a whole object as access internal, it doesn't make sense to have another internal procedure inside it. We can also do that on tables. We can have a table internal. Maybe makes sense if you have a setting table or some table that you just do not want any other app to make use of. You mark the whole table as internal and nobody can access that data. You can also do that on field level. Say, hey, this field, some secret, is something I want to keep secret, want to keep that inside my app, so I hide it from other apps. That can also make a lot of sense to do it like this. So you see, we get more and more possibilities here. We can, if we want, make internals visible to other apps, usually test apps. So a test app can make use of, or should make use of our app, of course. Maybe you want to have a dependent app on app source, but as Waldo told me previous time, there are people that are just removing your app then and trying to create an app with that app ID that they found so they can get access to your app.
Yeah, you really need
So how many people are doing that here in the room?
Not too many.
Not too many. That's good.
I do that. But anyway, it's a danger, and you actually see it as a warning as well. It is not recommended to publish an app on app source anywhere actually, even not a BTE app, that has internals visibles to true. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, for test apps, we do that. You need that. If you want to work with internal procedures, you still need to test those procedures. But it's a good practice that when you build your app, you compile, you build, for however you do it, that you remove internals visibles first and then build your app, and that's the one that you release.
Or at least, if you put it on app stores like this, do not think that you will then really stop other apps from getting access, because it is not a security boundary. That is actually the message.
That's the message.
There is also a local access modifier. What I do here on in this screenshot is that some secret field is now marked as a local field. And this locks or excludes anybody inside my app. So no objects can really access this field anymore. Not even inside my app. Only the table itself can access that secret. And why would I do this? Maybe because I want to encapsulate how I implement that some secret. In this case, it's just a text, but who knows what is in that text? It could also be a key for key vault, or could be a key for isolated storage, whatever. So with the getter and the setter, I make sure that I implement it my way, and I can also change the behavior in the future and not break anybody else, because everybody can use the get secret and set secret. So this is also a possibility that we have now with the access modifiers. Then we have protected, only for objects that can be extended. That is basically tables, pages, and reports, which gives access to your own app and a dependent app.
So
Global variables.
By protecting it, you're basically giving it.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of making them internal.
Nice word choice.
In fact, it's inherited from .NET. There you have the same thing. Yeah.
So that makes it okay?
Yeah, that makes it okay. Yeah, in my world, yes.
Okay.
So here we have a page with some variables that are marked as protected, meaning you can still not see them from the outside world. Well, could you even with global variables? But they are accessible from the page extension. And that is actually what it is about. So you don't need to have functions inside that page that set global variables, etc. That's the idea with protected var. And then we are to my pilot.
Code cops. Okay, who of you is using Code cops? Are we really using Code cops? Okay, other question maybe. Who of you ever migrated your code from CIL to AL and then switched on Code cops? You liked your output? I think many people, many of us actually just disabled them again, because it made the compiler very slow. You had like a list of errors, and the next warning or error you really didn't see anymore. I mean, it was the one too many kind of errors. So we didn't have code cops at all back in the days, and that has been quite a change. We should get used to that. In fact, I really would recommend to switch them on and comply with them, at least most of them. Yeah. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can easily switch them on in the settings file. I usually just do it per workspace, that you switch it on in the settings file, and I set them all like this code cop, per tenant extension cop, and UI cop, and obviously a separate setting to enable that. Yeah, and you see here already, this is actually what happened. Now, when you migrate your code and you have thousands of issues and maybe in hundreds of or tens of code cops, fixing them is something you should do, because a code cop or a warning in a code cop is only interesting when you have none. Because when you then create a warning or you create an unused variable or whatnot, that's when you will act, because that's what you will see, because all of a sudden you have a warning. Yeah.
Your co-pilot has a suggestion.
That's it.
Yes. Can I make a suggestion to you?
Yes?
Okay. So, because of performance reasons, it is better to switch off your background code analysis.
Depends on how
Copilot
big
out.
your extension is. But yeah, that is true.
So it's actually in the performance guideline to switch it off because of performance.
That's this setting, AL background code analysis, and you can even set it on file these days, so you're actually only analyzing your current file that you have opened. If you have an extension of thousands of files, I would not switch it off, but I would at least set it to files, at least that whatever you're working on, that's what you get in foreground at that point. Okay? But in any case, do know that when you have these thousands of issues, don't give up. You need to fix them. And to easily fix them, what I would say, let's bend the rules a little bit. Yeah? Have an analysis on what all of your issues that you have, switch them all off, like this one. This is one that I will keep in my code rule set, by the way. I don't like Microsoft deciding how I name my variable. I will decide how I name my variables. But yeah, it's a simple rule set file you can set up, and you can simply, again in settings, refer to it. What I would suggest, all of the settings you have, if you have thousands of warnings, put them all here and switch them all off. So you don't have any warnings, and at least the next warning you'll see. And you have a working list. This is a working list. You can switch them on, basically by removing one rule set or one rule one by one, and you can start just very efficiently fixing all the warnings that you have. You can focus on all unused variables, and then you can focus on all next issues that you have. Yeah. That's how we did that, and it was actually quite efficient. There is also something that's called pragmas. Be careful. I mean, this is nice that we can give special instructions to the code to the compiler, but you shouldn't be switching off code warnings too much with the pragma. You really need to have a good reason to use this. One of the reasons I can think of is, for instance, for obsolescence. If you have an obsolescence that you still cannot fix just because your code doesn't allow it yet, then you would be able to switch it up temporarily. A pragma, in my opinion, is always a to-do for later. You need to have pragmaless code at some point. That's clean code. A code full of pragmas is not clean code.
So, well, you already asked the question how many people are testing. So that is, I think, quite okay. Mm-hmm. But what is actually testing? Well, I mean, what is testing? Well, it's kind of having criticism. Well, now it's called testing. Before, it's called different, right? So it just depends on the context. Automated testing actually saves time. It doesn't cost money. It saves time. It saves money.
Try to sell that to your manager.
Yeah, well, I tried. I tried to sell that internally, and the way how I did it was just by saying, okay, V24 is around the corner. All customers will be upgraded to it in the next 2 weeks. And then somebody said, well, shouldn't we test? Yeah, we should test, but go ahead. Okay, long story, but at least we have now automated tests. So, all code should be or must be tested before you release it. And that needs to be repeated for every single code change. All those tests need to be consistent, like you always testing in the same way. And when you do this, we have this way of testing. That is kind of your, let's say, your insurance policy. Because then you know when you release the code for the next version of your software, the next version of Business Central, it will be right, it will be working. That doesn't mean that customers should not do some acceptance testing if it works as they expected. I mean, You can write a test, and the test might still be wrong because you're testing the wrong thing. You're not testing how the customer would expect it to work. But at least the test you write is how you think it is going to work. So test-driven development would mean you write a failing test, where you start with. Then you make sure with the code that the test passes, and then finally refactor the code. Maybe you need to put something in and structurize the code in a different way. That's all fine as long as the test passes. That is how it works. Even if I have to refactor some code that is already there for a long time, where we not have automated tests for yet, I start off with writing an automated test, make sure the test passes, and then I start refactoring the code. That makes sure everything is still working.
Maybe before we continue, because I know it is a problem. Who of you have a problem in convincing your management to do automated testing? You see, that's for me like an insane amount of people. 1 or 2 would be fine. This was too much. And maybe, I don't know if it's a tip or not, but we were fortunate enough to be able to convince internal to do automated testing. At this point, we have about like 8,000 or 9,000 tests for our product. And what I do, I send every single bug that we avoided, because that's what I want to know. What did we avoid? You don't know what you didn't get. You cannot report the time you saved, because it didn't happen. Yeah? But at least you can see like, hey, I had failing tests, and it was a bug. Maybe because of Microsoft, I report that. Look, this is what we saved. Maybe of your own code changes. Hey, look, that is what we saved. And at some point, I had this previous days, I used this example as well. We had, by simply adding one field to a table in a customer extension, about 100 or 200 tests fail. Just adding a field to a table. And you might wonder, like, how on earth can a test fail? Well, simple. It's transfer fields. And I had all my copied document stuff failing. And by the way, there are more than 100 copied document combinations that you can have. And they all failed, in my opinion. So, and not opinion, what happened. So, I keep on reporting that. Look, this is what we saved, this is what we saved. And that is one thing. And the second thing is, at some point, you can also report the time you actually only need for upgrades. We're upgrading every single month, and it shouldn't take too much time. And if you can compare that to back in the days, we're all OGs, we can compare that to back in the days. Look what time that we save for upgrades. That might be maybe a tip as well. I keep doing that. Like, look, this is a good thing. Automated testing, we do that, and this is what we gain from it.
Maybe we should have a session at a partner conference to convince all those non-convinced partners.
I hear it too often, like, but management doesn't want to pay for that. Or customers doesn't want to pay for that. When I'm like, but we are in this ever-changing world. We are in this always upgrading every month kind of thing. And you want me to do a good job and not test? I don't see it.
All right, so breaking changes, another reason for us to do automated tests, actually. So breaking changes, what Microsoft is doing, and what we should do, is their code is always obsoleted first. What Microsoft is doing in their code is that they obsolete the code, and then after at least 12 months, sometimes longer, the code will be cleaned up. So you find something in the code like this, what you see here, if not clean 20, obsolete, and then replaced by. Funny thing here, now you suddenly need to know what is a list of a dictionary. They really redesigned this piece of code, create dim, what we are used to for decades. Sometimes features are being deprecated or replaced. That is also documented. documented in different places, to be honest, because there are deprecated features in the application, there are deprecated features in the platform, in the system, whatever. There are different places where deprecated features are being documented. So here we see that in 2 years from now, API v1 will be removed. The funny thing is that it says in the title removed, and then in a column moved, removed or replaced is being replaced. So what is it going to be, replaced or removed? Anyway, in this case, it is actually replaced by v2 already a long time ago, but okay. API v1 will just not be there, so will be removed.
It's like sales prices, no? It's already deprecated for a long time. It's not removed.
Well,
it's
but it's a redesigned feature. On new
okay.
Hold on, hold your horse about price module. So we also have this one, deprecated feature. This was announced in 2023 release wave 2, so half a year ago. Schema version for custom APIs from schema version v1 to v2. And in version 24, it was already applied. So this was not a year in advance, it was half a year in advance. So just saying that in this case, they did not just break a feature, they also break the promise to have it 1 year in advance. Just saying, sometimes that happens. So you really need to pay attention. And this schema version is a bad thing, actually, because it breaks all your integrations with custom APIs, including Power Automate stuff, etc. At least I have heard a lot about it. Then we have redesigned features. So they're going to replace something with something else. Sales prices was a module that they promised to replace.
Well, that was a bad promise.
That was a bad promise, and they are still promising it. Sometime in the, I don't know, distant future it's going to happen. You were begging them to keep sales price, right?
I still think it's the worst idea ever to remove all sales price.
So many people think like that.
I'm quite convinced that there will be anarchy or some kind, with any kind of PTE extension for customers that develop their own extensions on old sales pricing and are totally not into testing and continuously upgrading and all that things. And now all of a sudden we remove that and automatically upgrade to new version. No, I don't think. I don't see it.
And then we have this one you see here on the screenshot called GL entry aggregations when posting invoices. And you may think, that's not for me. But what's actually behind it is the new invoice posting engine. And the new invoice posting engine means that they take a serious amount of code out of code unit 80 and 90. I'm just saying 80, 90 here for the OGs, because you all know what that is. They're taking out the code of sales post and purchase post and put it in a different code unit, which they call the invoice posting engine, including all the events that they originally had in code unit 80 and 90, meaning that it breaks all of your event subscribers to, well, most of them to code unit 80 and 90, because you know you need to suddenly subscribe to a different code unit. And to make that easier for you, the events that they passed into or copied into the other code unit are not exactly the same. Of course not. Why? So this is not. This is an example where
it wouldn't be a breaking change. It would be so.
Yeah. So this is an example where you actually need to read very carefully what is in the description and what does that mean for me, and that I really can recommend you to do that. And then, oh horror, the invoice posting engine was in the first place only available for sandboxes to be enabled in a feature with feature management. So you could develop for it, but it only worked in sandboxes. And then it's going to be a feature that is going, customers can enable it in feature management. Can you imagine that? That a customer switched it on while you were not ready to support it? Well, that is a horror scenario. So be careful with all those documentation, read it and really think about it. How can I prepare for it? How does it really touch my code, affect my code, etc. And maybe you need to support both old and new feature, which could be a reason for the pragma, because if I support a new feature, I do not want to have the messages from the obsoleted code, because I support the new one already. But hey, yeah, the old stuff is still there. So then I put a pragma around it.
That's a reason for a pragma.
Yeah. And then we sometimes have new features. So yeah, that can have an impact on your customization. So Microsoft, as a new feature, said we have new terminology for project management. So everything that is called jobs is now called projects in the UI. So any field you have that is related to jobs should be renamed to, or at least the caption, renamed to project. Well, that's quite an impact, of course, on your code. And sometimes these kind of features are also enabled with feature management. Not this one, that's just they upgrade and they get project everywhere. So, for breaking changes, test everything.
Yeah. Next topic, performance. Question, do you care about performance? Do you know what locking is? Do you really?
People not sure about it.
A little bit less. A few things. When we talk about locking and Business Central, I mean, wow, things have changed. Things have changed finally. Yeah. I'm going to just touch some basics. Business Central, out of the box, if you just read, it does dirty reads. Okay, so kind of like meaning we are reading uncommitted data. That's how it is. Did anyone ever care? No, we didn't. It's how it works, and we don't really, or let's say, are that focused on it like, oh, it should be dirty. It's fine. The nice thing about uncommitted reads is that we can read even if the data is locked. Yeah? Okay. Read committed would mean that we cannot read the moment that the data is locked. We need to wait until the data is unlocked, and then we can read. And while we're reading, we are locking in a shared lock. So we can kind of like let multiple people read at the same time committed data. But at that point, again, another transaction is not able to write. Yeah? So we are locking at that point. That's a read committed. Okay? So I think we need to be happy that out of the box, everything is read uncommitted. And then we have update lock. That is pretty much from the moment we start to write, we are locking until the end of the transaction the resources that that we wrote. Okay. We can do other things. We can basically push Business Central to lock until the end of the transaction, even when you're just reading. Yeah. Okay. Now we know this. Let's do a quiz. So, when you look at this fantastic piece of code, which, it's just 3 steps. If I do just a read operation, in this case a find last, yeah, that's, as I said, out of the box, a read uncommitted, yeah. And then, down the line, there is some kind of write action, like in this case, an insert. At that point, and I'm talking here pre-version 23, very important, yeah, not version 23 or later. Then, all of a sudden, after that write transaction, we are still in that same transaction. There's lots of code, and maybe there are some kind of subscriber, event, whatever other app that is hooking into our code and does a read operation on its own. Pre-version 23, this code, would it be read committed? Nobody. Okay. Read uncommitted? No. That's an update log. Like for 25 years and more, maybe, this is how Navision, Nav, Business Central worked. Yeah, it was actually what I call a pessimistic lock, because that's as pessimistic as you can get. It was not really a problem back in the days because, I mean, we owned all the code. It was in the database. We could see it. We could read it. And now we don't really own all the code with all these apps anymore. We don't really know who is subscribing to events anymore. So, yeah, again, back in the days, we have log table. Okay, so pretty much the same. This, by the way, is good practice back in the days. We couldn't say, like, find last true to lock the last record. If we would modify that last record, we would set log table and then find last, and then it would lock that table. So that would throw an update log. Question, what would happen on the get again in that same transaction? Who says update log? Exactly, both of you were wrong. Well, we're right. Yeah, so again, pessimistic locking. Yeah, until the end of the transaction, from the moment I have one log, it will just lock anything I read in that same table. Okay, that's how it has been for as long as we could remember up until version 23. So things have changed. Since version 23, this get is going to be a read committed. So out of the box, we have much shorter logs. And by the way, can I just show off this visualization again? I mean, I'm really proud of that. But in any case, it's going to be a read committed now, meaning the shared log, meaning multiple people are able to read this resource, including me, and I'm only locking this for the amount of time that I'm reading it, not until the end of the transaction. Much shorter logs, much less locking behavior. Yeah? Log table. Again, this is what we wrote. We converted the code to version 23. We know that in the find last, it's going to do an update log. But who thinks, now in the last statement, locking behavior has changed, version 23, so who still thinks it's going to be an update log? Yeah, exactly. If we now use log table anywhere in code, we're going back to the old days. Yeah. Log table was a good practice. Back in the days, log table is bad practice when you look at the code now. If you have log tables in your product, in your PTE, I would strongly advise to kick it out. Yeah? You are going back to the old days by simply doing log table. We have a solution for that. It's called read isolation. With read isolation, I can do stuff. And Duilio, I see you. This is a wrong example, but it kind of like shows that you can even overrule when you're in that old mood. So again, I do a log table and find last. I know that's going to be an update log. And then I set read isolation to something else, in this case read committed, and I overrule for this variable the statement to read uncommitted. So even in that log table bad thing, you can overrule it to a good thing. Yeah? Where is this significant? Just imagine that the first two lines is in an extension that you don't own. You cannot change that code, but at least your own code, you can still decide on how the locking isolation or the read isolation needs to be. Yeah? This is actually a very important change that has happened since then. Now, I'm showing this with find. So this basically, when you think about read isolation, you think about find and get. But reading is much more than find and get. This is an example, is empty. Yeah? As empty is like a very cheap statement on SQL Server, but is it really? If is empty, if it's not empty, you're still reading records, and it's locking those records. Yeah? I would even claim that most, or at least a lot, of the deadlocks that we have and log timeouts that we have is because of is empty. It's because of calc sums. It's because of counts. These are three examples of things that we don't really think about, that it's also a read operation. It's absolutely a read operation, and back in the old days, it's going to log as well. Yeah? And that is just a very important thing to remember. So, things have changed. Once again, we are as OGs, yeah, this is a very important thing we need to understand, in my opinion. So, before version 22, we had this pessimistic locking, and then in version 22, we had this ability to do read isolation, but only that, so manually we could overrule that isolation level. And then since version 23, we have it. Yeah, I have that in slide as well. So I call it pessimistic locking. The real term is two-state locking. We have two states of locking back in the days. Either it was update lock or read uncommitted. Yeah. Then we have the read isolation, good practice. I would even claim whatever read isolation or read that you do, any kind of read, calc sums, up until find set, find last, get even, up until is empties, always provide a read isolation. Always. You are the developer, you know what you're going to do with that data. And if you don't, maybe there's a job offering in sales. Sorry. Tri-state locking, that is the new, let's say, behavior that we need to enable. By the way, if you're upgrading, we need to enable that in the feature management. But when enabled, well, then Business Central behaves differently. It will lock less. It will do shared locks. It will do read uncommitted, and so on, and so on. Only this upgrade, we basically cut down deadlocks about 90%. Simply by this upgrade. No joke. Okay, there is an entire session about this on Friday, if I'm not, yeah, Friday at 1:30, that handles this tri-state locking in full, and it will obviously go much more into detail than I just did. There is more in terms of performance. Have you ever heard of partial records? Come on. Yes, you heard about it. And we talk about partial records. I mean, back in the days when we had these companion tables, it was called. Every time we had a new table extension, there was a new table, companion table to the original table. So if you have 5 extensions all extending the sales header, you had 6 sales header tables. And while reading, it would join all of these tables. And you can already guess, the more tables, the slower it got. So a solution was implementing set load fields. There we have it. I would even claim every single read operation, you need to provide set load fields. If you went to my performance session like a few years ago, I have no idea how many years ago that was. Was anyone there? Oh, a few, okay. I handled this actually in full. I will have a screenshot about that as well. And you could clearly see that having set load fields was a big performance improvement. You could even see that if you weren't able to predict what fields you had to load, and you would turn into a JIT load, just-in-time load, like get me all anyway, although I already got a few of them, that it was even faster still than not doing a set load fields. So set load fields, good practice. Yeah. Is it still a good practice? I would claim yes. This is a screenshot from back in the days. Same screenshot that I used in that session. And you could see, and I'll try to explain. So this grade test is a test with 2 table extensions and the 2 table extensions with, no table extensions and no table extensions with set load fields. This is 2 table extensions, 4, 6, 8 table extensions. So the more table extensions I had, the slower it got if I didn't apply set load fields. Yeah. Now, since version 23, things have changed. Also, there is one of my favorite new features. We don't have all these companion tables anymore. So Microsoft now combines them into one companion table for extension objects and just the main table for the main object. Yeah? So we have at most one join and joining 2 tables together. And then you might say, like, okay, I don't need set load fields anymore. Yeah, you do. You still do. You still do. Because you're getting all those fields every single time and you don't need them. So this is just having multiple table extensions, pretty the same as this one, the same test, applied to version 24, I think this is, or version 23. And you see, you need to look at the scale. The scale is much bigger here, and that it barely is slower, but it's still twice as fast when you set load fields, So please, I would even claim, always set load fields. We already have set load fields and read isolation that we need to provide with every single read. And then there are calc fields. Calc fields. Yeah. Are we going to do it?
Yeah, of course.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I would claim, and he is going to overrule that claim, that you will never need calc field statement anymore.
Are you sure about that?
I didn't expect that question.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, so
the
I'm
thing
going to
is
say one word.
blob.
Blob.
Yeah. So a blob field, sure. If you need to calculate a blob field in an autocalc field, bad idea, especially in a big list. So sure, for blob fields, use calc fields. For any other, just use autocalc fields. So now we have 3 statements that we really need to look at for every single read operation. Yeah. Next, we have data access intent. Do you know about this? That's not enough. Absolutely not. There is a lot that we do in pages, APIs, that actually is just reports. That's actually just meant to be read. We can set the access intent to read only, so that online it will just read in a secondary node. It has not really been working the last couple of versions, so it doesn't really matter for this version, but it's a good practice to apply that in code. And do know you can overrule that. You set the intent in code, and you can overrule that in the app. Now, getting all this, now just imagine DevOps, yeah? This is a lot of code changes. We have been going through some phases as developers, right? So, yeah, you should implement this code review. My question right in the beginning of the session. You need to do this code review. Code review gives you quality. Code review gives you a moment. You can check these things. We do code review every single pull request. All pull requests. All of them. Sure, we don't look at 1,000 lines of code in the pull request, but at least we can filter on all the finds and all the read operations and see, did they provide read isolation, all the reads. Did I provide read isolation? Did I look at the calc fields? Do I find the calc fields? Did I change any settings? So code reviews is, for me, one of the fundamentals to get quality on your product.
And annoy your developers, right?
And developers, I mean, it's one of the things that gets me to see what level my developers are, and if they need extra knowledge or courses or whatnot. Yeah, and in this ever-changing thing, I'm talking version 22, version 23, 24. I mean, it's always a different thing we need to look at. So you need to constantly change all these behaviors. So yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. Now, there is a tool set for performance, obviously, Business Center Performance Toolkit. I want at least 50 hands now that knows it. Oh, okay, there were a few, not that many. I did a course about Business Center Performance Toolkit the last couple of days. I really think this is, I mean, it is going to change our way on how to prepare for performance issues. But we can be ad hoc as well with the performance analyzer. We all know the in-client performance analyzer. Okay, that's good. Teach your users and teach your consultants so you get data to analyze from the moment there is a performance problem. Yeah, you might not know the BC Perf tool, mine, but you do know telemetry. And if you don't, tomorrow there is a session on telemetry by a weird guy. Yeah, your turn.
Right, so that's quite a story. Interfaces. Actually, almost don't dare to ask, but how many of you are really into interfaces? Not so many, as I would expect, but it's also based on the small survey that Chris did earlier. So, yeah, when you're looking to know what interfaces are, maybe you are curious, then yeah, you get some statements on the documentation in an example like this code with the I address provider and stuff. and that you have a polymorphic way of calling objects, that implementation depends on an object and whatnot. It's kind of a, let's say, a little bit confusing, or at least a lot to take in. And even when it comes to combination with enums, people are struggling. How do interfaces, code units work together, and how is that related to enums? So instead of doing 35 slides about it, I decided to go with some examples in code. Let me zoom in. Hope this is readable for everybody in the back. Can you see it? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So what I have here is a piece of code where, well, as an example, and this one is a setup table that gives the user the option to store files even on either on Dropbox or Google Drive or SharePoint. And there is an option here, so the user can choose one of those three. Obviously, there need to be some extra settings attached to that, but that's not what the example is about. And I have a connector code units for Dropbox, a connector code unit Google Drive, and one for SharePoint. And there we have very simple implementation of saving a file, getting a file, or deleting a file. And the same as goes for Google Drive, and the same goes for SharePoint. And to choose which code unit should be called, I have a file connector code unit, where based on the setting, I say, well, if my option is Dropbox, call that code unit, and Google Drive, SharePoint, same way. So this is already a little bit of structured code. Maybe as far as we could get back in the CAL days. And maybe you were even proud of it, that you built something that was structured like this. I mean, I've seen worse code, actually. So, the question is actually, how can we extend this? How can we make this code better? I can promise you at the end of the demonstration, there's just going to be one line, and not this whole piece of code.
You wanted to say shit, right?
Yeah, it's what you heard, right?
I heard, yeah.
So, come on. I'm trying to have a story here.
I mean, I can push you off stage. I mean, this is quite fun.
Yes, it's quite pretty close, pretty close. No, so what if we want to extend this? What if we want to test this? What if we want to? Well, let's first look at extending. For example, with an event. We add an event on before save file, and then somebody else, some other app could say, oh, I have an integration with a different one, and I overrule your setting. So I set is handled to true. In fact, this whole on before with is handled is something you see a lot in the base app. To me, this is an anti-pattern. This is not a good pattern, because this pattern could be abused by all other apps overwriting your piece of code. They're not respecting each other's existence, so they think I'm alone in the world, I said is handled to true, and you have no idea who actually did it, etc. So you cannot really control it. So the question is actually, how could we do this in a better way? Well, the point is that this option field cannot be extended. Back in the days in CAL, when you had access to the source code, you could add a comma to it and add another option. Simple. I guess you all remember the...
That's good practice.
Second?
That's good practice.
That was a good practice.
At least 10 commas. I mean, have 10 commas.
I guess you all remember the report usage table with the usage field with, I don't know, 25 options. And when we wanted to add another option to that, we added 10 commas.
Who did that?
Exactly,
10 exactly, right?
Yeah. 10.
Yeah, we all did 10 commas.
And then we added our own option. And then at some point, because why did we do that? Because Microsoft may add one other option to that list as well, right? So they had 10 places to fill, 10 gaps. Then Microsoft came along and they said, well, we're going to add a new option to the usage fields. You know what they did? They added 10 commas. That really happened.
No joke.
It's not a joke. It's an anecdote. And I asked them, why are you adding 10 commas? They said, well, maybe the partners have added an option there.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Stop thinking for partners. Just do your thing, and we'll manage. We have your back.
We'll think for you. Yeah.
It's really an anecdote that happened. I don't know how long ago, but
and
10,
open
15
source
years.
is born, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so we have these days, instead of options, we have an enum. So let's go with enums. So I have now an enum here with the 3 options. I added a non-option as well. And I made this enum extensible, meaning that I allow other apps to add their own values to the enum. So the table is now based on an enum instead of an option. And how does that look like in my code? Well, slightly different. I don't have an on before. I just follow my own 3 options. And if none of these options, none of these values were actually the case, I call an on-save file. So some other app could then take it, see if it was their option, yes or no. Most probably they don't see any other option anyway, so only they can see their own option. And mine, of course. So it's slightly better, but we are actually not there yet. The point is, this whole case statement, with if this is the option, then call this and this and this, that is actually your red flag. That's a flag where you should think, hey, wait a second, I could have an interface here. A case statement is an indicator that you could apply an interface. And why is that?
So you're going to make a case against case.
Exactly, a case against a case. So what I can do here, if I look at the code here, it is save file, save file, save file. They all have exactly the same signature, the functions. Same parameters, even the same name. I mean, the same goes with a get file, the same goes with delete file, all exactly the same. So if we look at those code units, they look the same. They have something in common.
Yeah, they all
They
have
have
messages.
the same public interface. What you say?
They all have messages.
Yeah, they all have messages. Yeah, exactly. I could have made one code unit maybe. Anyway, so they have the same interface, the same public interface. And that is where the interface comes in. So I'm going to change this to an interface. I need to reload, which I had a shortcut for. I can really recommend that. So I have an interface. And what is an interface? An interface, actually, we could say an empty code unit. There's no code in an interface, only the definitions of the procedures, the functions that you want to have. The name of the interface, I was happy to see that Vincent this morning in the keynote was also using the same naming convention, starting with a capital I. That is what I do in .NET world, so I can see where Vincent is coming from. I, and then the name, and I don't waste space. So no spaces in the name, pun intended. So this is my interface. This is how my code unit should look like. Now, well, the idea is then that in my code unit, I can say this code unit implements that interface. That means if I specify this, that I must have exactly the same functions. I may have more, but at least the functions defined in the interface should be there. So as soon as I delete one of them, I get an error message saying, hey, your interface does not, your code unit does not implement the interface member save file. So it must be exactly that. Well, what is the benefit of that? That is, in my code, I can have an interface. And the interface itself, if I look at file connector, then I see delete file, get file, save file. I see exactly those functions. So in fact, I can just call the function on an interface object. However, if I do it like this, I call it on the interface, then as the first line here, this line is going to throw an error because it has no idea to which code unit it needs to go to. There's still a code unit that really implements the interface. So calling it directly on an interface that is not initialized with a code unit behind it is going to throw an error that the interface is not initialized. So what I do here is I assign something to that iFile connector interface. And that is a function. I just put it into one function so I could reuse it in the other functions as well. And this function is returning an interface. But what it does here is reading the setup and then say, well, if it is Dropbox, I assign this code unit to iFile connector. And if this code unit is not implementing that interface, I get an error message saying, hey, this code unit cannot be assigned to the interface because it's not implementing the interface, so I cannot represent it with an interface variable. So I have a function still with the case statement, but at least I have now one line of code to get my code unit, and then on that interface I call the function of, and it will then be executed by the code unit that I assigned here. Now this case statement is something we want to get rid of, because this case statement still requires an event, and this case statement is actually the link between the enum values and the code units that implement the interface for that particular enum value. So actually this is the link between them, this is the magic. What we're actually going to do is to delegate the whole case statement to the server, to Business Central in the background. And that is possible by going to the enum and say, hey enum, you implement that file connector as well. And then for each value, we must define that the implementation of iFile connector is going to be Dropbox connector. So what we're actually doing here on this line is saying if there is value Dropbox, then the implementation of the interface will be this code unit. So instead of the case statement, we link those values in our definition. And as you can imagine, we do this for all the values. And if somebody extends the code unit, extends the enum, they have to provide their own implementation for the same interface. So let me get rid of this and just switch. Let me go to enum with interface. No, I want to come up to this. There we go. And look at the enum with interface. So this is how it looks like. And now I have for every value said, well, this is the interface. I have even, so this is the implementing code unit. I even have a default implementation for those that do not have an implementation. They go to the no file connector. And then I look into the code unit, it's all different. I only need to assign my enum field to the interface, and the whole case statement is in fact now done in the background by the AL runtime, looking into the values. Hey, this is the interface you're looking for, this is the code unit that connects to it, so that implements it, and here you go, automatically. So after all, I have still 2 lines of code, but I could actually write something like this. Success is get file connector dot save file, file name. Oh, this is delete file, come on. Save file. There we go. So, just 1 line of code. Pretty easy, isn't it? The point is, then this iFile connector does not have a value, not have a state. I'm not using that as a variable, so it depends on how your code should work. Maybe you should call multiple functions on that interface. In that case, You should not go with the one-liner. So there's one thing left here, and that is testing. What if I want to test this code? What if I want to mock the response that comes from that code unit? Well, this function here is now responsible for getting the implementation. I want to reverse that. I want to tell save file, use this interface. And then I've actually used this code unit for the interface. So if I pass in this as a parameter, rather than letting him read which code unit it is, then I reverse the dependency to the calling party. And for a test function, that would be ideal, because then the test function can say, hey, use this mocking code unit that actually mocks the response that you get from Google or Dropbox or whatever, because we're not going to test really the API, we're going to test how you react to whatever Dropbox can come back with. And that is the final part here, inversion of control. So here you see the save file where I insert iFile connector as a dependency injection, this is actually called. So I can just call it on this one. I still have the save file itself as the default one. So all my code, my normal code works. This function is still responsible for getting the default implementation, but test code units could call this one with a different implementation for this interface. And this is what we call inversion of control. And actually there's another session in the same time slot, I'm sorry for that, but discussing this session from Vierco. I can really recommend you to watch the video of that session, because it will really worth it. And now at least you probably understand what it's all about. Okay, so there's a little bit more to interfaces. In the next version, we are able to extend interfaces, and in the keynote you already saw the keywords is and as for testing and casting, so not going to dive into that. You have seen that this morning, so I can switch over to our pilot.
Namespaces. Ever heard of it? Using it? Honestly? Honestly? Come on. So you are already using namespaces in Business Central? Okay, that's for more like it. So yeah, namespaces in Business Central. Now we have namespaces. Who of you thinks this is the solution for object IDs? It is not, sorry too. And it's never gonna be, and I strongly believe we are gonna have object IDs for a long time. But maybe it's going to be a solution for something else, like prefixes, right? Because this namespace thing, it's actually just there to logically group and order and our code, in code, yeah? Mainly now to prevent naming conflicts. So, sorry, I'm not showing that just yet. So if we go a little bit into code, what should stand out of this piece of code is I'm just created a customer table. Were we ever able to create a customer table? No. But we can now. So basically, we can now put object in our own namespace, which I obviously did, and namespace, OG, demo, waldo, namespaces. And yeah, that's probably going to be the next part, like how are we going to name our namespaces? And this gives us some opportunities. Just to show you a few things, if I would not put this object like in a namespace, or would define a namespace, obviously I have a problem, because there is already a customer table from Microsoft, right? And if you then look like in this case, oh yeah, that is the other way around. If I would define my new object as being in a decent namespace, Dino, no, OG, we are OGs. Then all of a sudden you see now I have a problem with vendor. I cannot use just the vendor table anymore. I really need to define where that comes from, because I'm in this namespace space. Yeah, I just made that up. In any case, it will tell me like, yeah, this vendor is not there, and I can include the usings, and basically it will discover like, where do I have a vendor table? Oh, in this namespace, and you can add that namespace. You can even do it a little bit different, like if you do not want to use the usings, you can just do something like the fully qualified name right into the namespace.
Vendor.vendor.
Vendor.vendor, yeah.
Beautiful.
And if you would really like look into Microsoft, they really
Go wild.
use usings, I guess. And they went crazy on the namespaces. But that is actually the next question that we need to ask. I can imagine a world that this is going to be mandatory, that we need to use namespaces. I can imagine that at some point there's going to be a code cop that says, hey, app source cop, like, hey, yeah, there's no namespace, so there's no app for you. So we need to look into how we are going to do that. And that's why I didn't really believe that anyone, or at least not too many people, are already using namespaces, because we really need to think this through. How are we going to organize our code now all of a sudden? Because changing a namespace is going to be a breaking change. You have one chance. You can only organize once, let's say. So think about it. Yeah, there are some guidelines, some premature guidelines here. And I honestly don't know yet myself what would be a good guideline, like my company.appname something, or why company.appname. I don't know. We'll see. But if you decided, I did put some links on here. There is an article from Microsoft that if you would like list all your objects in an Excel, and you would tie an object name, a namespace to that, there is a script that will add the namespace in all of these objects, a PowerShell script. If that works for you, not for me, at least not yet. And I mean, I provided this blog post that I ever did, like to easily find an object name in VS Code for you to find, to kind of like do a find replace. I don't think this is gonna work either. I just wanted to put my blog somewhere, I guess. In any case, there is going to be a session on Friday, again from Microsoft, that dives deeper into namespaces. And there is, even in the title, and never dare to ask. So maybe there are some answers to questions we even didn't think of in a way. Last topic of the day, and I think we will have time.
The whole day?
Well, depends a little bit. It's going to be noon soon. So, DevOps. Let's dive a little bit into DevOps. And when I talk about DevOps, I'm not talking about Azure DevOps this time. Does anyone remember OMA? Oh, wow. Yeah, we're OGs, right? So this was kind of like, I think, one of the most used solution to do, let's say, source control in CAL, to do any kind of control of source in CAL. Yeah, yeah. Well, OMA is old, and we're not using that anymore. But we still have DevOps, or at least an approach to do collaboration, automation, continuous integration, and delivery. And what I mean with that is the collaboration part. We need to have some kind of system that tracks whatever we need to do, change control. We need to have some kind of automation. Wow. We need to have some kind of automation that does automated stuff, like validating. Remember what I said, like code review. Maybe we can automate that a little bit. Implementing code cops is a form of code review. Yeah? You see here, BCPT, Business Central Performance Toolkit, could be an automated part that runs and basically helps you predict performance problems. Yeah? So we need to have, let's call them pipelines. Wow, I'm really messed up in my automation here. Anyway, Continuous integration. So we need to have these built. Remember that I said like these internals visible true is or internals visible to is maybe not a good setting. You might want to remove that. Well, then we need some kind of things, let's call it a build, that builds, changes, and whatever builds our app the way it needs to be built, like signing as well is part of the build. Yeah, and we need this continuous delivery. Publish an app. Can I ask, who dares to say the truth? Are you still uploading your app through that page upload app? Yeah, there are quite some people still doing that. And actually, the goal should be that you don't. That should be automated. So, yeah, DevOps can certainly, and I'm not talking Azure DevOps, I'm talking about a system that can help you do that. A DevOps, like Azure DevOps, is actually some kind of remote. And it all starts with your repository. Yeah? You need to set up your repository somewhere. Let's call it GitHub. Let's call it Azure DevOps. But it needs to be somewhere on some kind of system that can do stuff with that. Yeah? And when we can do stuff, we do stuff. And I just have a few examples, like next major. Remember, we are going to upgrade every single month. So we might want to be prepared for the next month. Not just the next major, also the next minor. Yeah? And these are all the kinds of automations that we need to be able to set up. Yeah? Code cops. There's a lot to say about code cops. I said a little bit. Another bit would be that I showed you a settings file. Maybe you should not be setting that up with a settings file. It needs to be pushed. It is a policy from the company that sets which code cops needs to be met with. That's not a setting on a workspace. Setting on a workspace is a setting from a developer. Yeah? So you should actually set up as a policy, as part of the pipeline, hard-coded thing, like just an example here. That you decide these are the code cops. This is my rule set on some kind of central place that all my pipelines download the same rule set, so I comply with all the same rules. Yeah? How my pipeline acts, when I fail meeting one of the rules. What is a warning? Is that really a warning? No. A warning means that I did dirty code, or smelly code. So I'm not allowing that. So what do I want to do when a pipeline gets a warning of my compile? I fail. It's a warning in a code cop is a failed compile. Yeah. So dependencies. A lot to say about dependencies as well. And all again things you can set up as a policy. Dependency in the app JSON is for the developer. Dependencies in the pipeline is for the policy. I don't want my developer to just add dependencies. This is a conscious decision. You need to do that on a higher level, on a design level, an architecture level. It needs to be validated. If just someone can add a dependency and the pipeline says, well, there's an actual dependency, I will take the file, then you're going to end up with spaghetti. Again, adding a dependency needs to be a very conscious choice. I would also do that within a pipeline. Yeah? Breaking changes. AJ talked about that, but how do we handle that? Again, in an automation, in a pipeline. Simple, actually. Install the previous version of the app, install the current version of your app, make it upgrade, and see if it works. If it doesn't, it's probably a breaking change. Or maybe your upgrade routine doesn't work. Yeah? These are all things you can do in your pipeline. App.json, I told you about the internals visible too, but there's actually a lot more. Things you need to set up as a policy for your app. How do you handle versions? You shouldn't be handling versions as a developer. It should be handled on a much higher level and just push that. It shouldn't be like this resource exposure policy. It should be hard-coded on policy level, let's say, which is the pipeline. Same for application insights key. I want to manage that, not app per app. I just want to manage that for every app. In my company, we have 50 apps for one product. Honestly, I'm not going to manage that on app level. That's too much time. Internals visible too. we should have some kind of way to handle that. Again, all of these is app.json. You can script that in whatever, like in PowerShell, it's just JSON manipulation. Preprocessor symbols, a very good example. At some point, when you start to use preprocessor symbols, which makes all the sense in the world, well, yeah, then one pipeline might want to build next version, a current pipeline might want to build the current version, and maybe another pipeline might want to build the Belgian or the Dutch version, which might be the same code base, but different processor symbols. And then, yeah, I have no idea what I meant with this, but you can track source, build, metadata as well. I really didn't, I don't remember. So, automated tests, an obvious one. AJ talked about that, you need to test. Obviously, just having test and being able to press the run button doesn't make any sense. You need to do that in an automated way, maybe every night, maybe every build. Very simply, what we do is with the 50 apps, we build one app and we run the test for one app. And every night, we install all apps in one environment and we run all tests in that environment from all apps. So we kind of like have the isolated test for one app and we have the, it's not really an integration test, but the test when we integrate all apps in one environment as well. It's different context. So, and gives you much more possibilities and fallbacks. And this is just one of a screenshot and how it could look like in DevOps. Another thing, BCPT, do not underestimate the power of preparing for performance issues. It's actually quite doable these days. This is a screenshot of one of the customers that we have been following up. Yeah, that's not true. This is an example where I intentionally messed up. So you could kind of like, what the idea is that you follow up, you basically run a code unit every day, yeah? And this code unit tracks how long it took to run that code unit. Let's take it as an example, posting an order in this case. And it will count the amount of SQL statements I had, yeah? And I do that every day. And my developers are developing. And at a certain point, they add development that adds an amount of SQL statements to that posting of an order. You would like to know that because you probably did quite a significant change in performance, bad one. So this is just how it could look like and how you can end it up. BCPT helps you setting up a scenario like that, helps you to run that every day, helps you to send it to telemetry. All you need to do is get it from telemetry, get it in some kind of Power BI report, add a metric to it, and you are following it up. Okay, Swagger. Just, I think, one of the last ones. Just a possibility you would be able to do so as well. We are building stuff in the pipeline, maybe not just app files, maybe we can also build a Swagger file that describes our API, our custom APIs that we developed in Business Central. Yeah? Which is obviously quite interesting for your third parties or whatnot that you're working with. Okay, obviously also deployment. Does anyone remember FOB files? Obviously, everyone remembers FOB files, and we had to manually deploy FOB files. I even hear sometimes I really miss the days from FOB files. It was easy to just deploy a part of the developments. Again, it's not simplicity, it's stupidity. Really, if we were deploying a part of the FOB files, we were deploying a part of the problem. Or probably ending up with a database that didn't compile completely anymore. Anyway, we got rid of FOB files. We have apps now, and we are able to deploy apps in an automated way. We are able to do that on SaaS, we are able to do that on-prem. Automate it, get rid of that one page and update. I mean, we have these 50 apps. I don't see myself uploading 50 apps, like every single release, to some hey. It's done. We're done. Okay, so there are solutions for that. AL go for GitHub, out-of-the-box solution from Microsoft on, obviously, GitHub. We have Alpaca, they're here. We have Allops, I'm here. So, yeah. And in terms of, the session, OGs, there is yeah, a lot more to talk about. So maybe we are back next year doing the follow-up of the OG other topics that we could talk about.
Man.
We have we have 1 minute for questions. I need to throw this at least once. Can I?
I didn't understand this part with the calc fields. You mean that we need to use AutoCalc fields instead of calc fields, or what exactly?
Okay, if you do calc fields, it's always a separate SQL statement. Always. Calc fields means select sum from a table. Yeah, could be an index or an index view, could be a table, but it's always a select sum. Set AutoCalc fields means that you will automatically calc the same sum while you're getting the rest of the record. So if you set AutoCalc fields, right, before a find set, it will have a big statement being find set and the sum in one SQL statement. And it especially shows when you do that, like when you start to loop. If you already have all your sums, you only have one SQL statement, right? If you do a calc fields, it's a select sum. It's like the amount of records plus one, the find amount of SQL statements that you would have. So that's why I would always push for set AutoCalc fields. Even in a get, you combine the two, the sums and the one record. Or the find first, you combine the two, instead of just two statements. Yeah? You have, yeah.
Yeah,
We have one over there.
You had some very interesting examples about interfaces. Is it possible to download this repositories?
Do you mean the demo interfaces repository?
Yeah,
The code,
yes, the code.
yes, that will be available or is already available. I need to check. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that will be on my GitHub.
Oh.
So I have a question about automatic release of PTE apps. So releasing them is easy, but how do you know any way to unpublish the older versions of PTE apps? Because now we are kind of making a mess of a lot of old versions in client environment of all the PTE app versions.
Yeah, you can do that with PowerShell. I mean, it would get me too much. Sorry?
Is there an API for that? Because I don't know there is. I mean,
You mean BC SAS?
Yeah, BC SAS.
I don't know by heart.
Because I also don't know, so
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Thank you.
So that repository with the demo interfaces, it's available on my GitHub.
Anyone else? Okay. And here as well.
That was the final question,
Quick
out
question.
of George.
It's been a while since I wrote a rule, so would it be possible to write a rule that always checks for set AutoCalc fields and set load fields before a find set?
Yeah, I didn't touch the custom code cops, but it is easy. Not easy. It is definitely not easy. But you would be able to create, like, for any kind of read, check whether what checks you did, like read isolation and set load fields and all those kind of things. Yeah, that's absolutely possible. Yeah, yeah. The linter cop would be a good custom code cop for that. And I think if you would suggest that, also Stefan Maron and Arthur, I think, are managing that, they would, I mean, it's very doable, absolutely. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone up there? Come on. Nobody, shit. Okay then, thank you so much.